1943. Nazi-occupied Amsterdam, a city of shadows, starvation, and fear. Inside a dimly lit room, a man stands before the most dangerous art collector on the planet. Reichsmarshal Hermann Göring, Hitler's right hand, a man who settles gallery disputes with a firing squad. Between them sits a masterpiece, a newly discovered painting by Johannes Vermeer. It's glowing, it's haunting, it's worth millions of Reichsmarks. But there's a secret in this room that could turn the floor into a bloodbath. A single incorrect brushstroke, one anxious beads of sweat, or one expert who looks just a fraction too closely. And the man selling this painting is dead before he hits the ground. Because what Göring doesn't realize is that the paint on this 300-year-old canvas is barely dry. The transaction is a success. Göring trades 137 genuine stolen masterpieces for this one single painting. The seller walks out into the cold night, wealthier than any artist in history. He has just committed the ultimate crime. He robbed the Third Reich with nothing but a paintbrush and a massive grudge. But this isn't just a story about a heist. It's a story about how a failed painter, dismissed by critics as unoriginal, decided to burn the entire art world to the ground. How did an ordinary man deceive the most powerful monsters of the 20th century? And why did his perfect crime eventually lead him to a death sentence from his own people? Welcome to the darkest masterpiece in history. To understand the crime, you have to understand the man. Amsterdam, the 1920s. The art world is in a state of feverish revolution. Picasso is shattering faces into cubes. Kandinsky is abandoning shapes for pure, chaotic emotion. The establishment is drunk on modernism. If it's weird, it's genius. If it's new, it's priceless. And then, there's Han van Meegeren. Han doesn't care about movements. He paints as if the 17th century never ended. He treats Rembrandt and Vermeer like gods. His technique? Flawless. His understanding of light? Surgical. For a moment, he thinks he's made it. His exhibitions are full. People acknowledge his skill. But Han doesn't just want to be good. He wants to be immortal. He wants the high priests of art, the critics, to crown him as the next great master. Instead, they gave him a death sentence. A prominent critic, the kind of man whose word can make or break a career, publishes a review that would change history. He writes, "Mr. van Meegeren possesses every virtue of the old masters, except originality." It wasn't just a critique, it was an execution. In the 1920s, being called technically brilliant but creatively dead was the ultimate insult. It branded you a copyist, a craftsman, a nobody. Han wasn't built to handle rejection. He didn't just get sad, he became consumed. Pride and rage are a dangerous cocktail, and Han drank the whole bottle. He fired back, publishing a furious manifesto attacking the pretentious frauds of the modern art world. He called them blind fools who wouldn't recognize true genius if it bit them. The result? The art world didn't fight back. They did something much worse. They ignored him. They exiled him. Humiliated and broke, Han vanished from Amsterdam. He fled to a seaside villa in the south of France, nursing a hatred that grew darker with every passing year. But in that French isolation, the bitterness didn't destroy him. It transformed. It became a weapon. He realized that he didn't need the critics to like his work. He just needed to prove they were idiots. The plan was audacious. It was insane. He wouldn't beg for their respect anymore. He would create a painting so perfect, so ancient, that these same experts would fall over themselves to praise it. He would wait for them to stake their entire reputations on his discovery. And then, when they were at the peak of their arrogance, he would reveal the truth and watch their world crumble. But to pull this off, he couldn't just be a painter. He had to become a ghost. He had to learn how to forge time itself. Southern France, early 1930s. Inside a quiet villa overlooking the Mediterranean, Han van Meegeren isn't painting for pleasure anymore. He's painting for blood. Revenge has become his religion. Forgery is his scripture. To destroy the critics, he has to do more than paint a good picture. He has to create a miracle. He locks himself away for years, obsessively studying a single target, Johannes Vermeer. The choice is calculated brilliance. Vermeer left behind fewer than 40 known paintings. He is the ghost of Delft. Art historians have spent decades praying for his lost early works to appear, specifically biblical scenes from a rumored period in Italy. The entire art world is a dry forest, waiting for a spark. Han is about to give them a forest fire. But there's a massive problem. A freshly painted canvas is a chemical crime scene. Oil paint stays soft for decades. It takes nearly a century for the surface to harden into that delicate web of cracks called craquelure, the fingerprint of an old master. If Han uses modern oils, a simple needle test or a drop of alcohol from a lab would expose him in seconds. To fool the experts, he has to fool science itself. Han converts his kitchen into a clandestine chemistry lab. He becomes a ghost hunter. He scours junk shops for worthless 17th century paintings, not for the art, but for the canvas. He carefully scrapes away the old images, preserving the genuinely ancient fabric and the original wooden stretchers beneath. Next, the pigments. Modern paints contain chemicals that didn't exist in 1650. So, Han goes back to the source. He hand grinds his own colors using period-accurate materials: lead white, yellow ochre, and the most expensive of them all, genuine ultramarine, made from crushed lapis lazuli stones. But even with the right paint and the right canvas, he still has the softness problem. How do you turn a 1932 painting into a 1632 masterpiece in a single afternoon? This is where Han's mad genius peaks. He discovers Bakelite, an early form of plastic invented in 1907. He realizes that if he mixes his pigments with a liquid plastic resin instead of just oil, and then bakes the canvas in a custom-made oven at exactly 105 degrees Celsius, something magical happens. The heat evaporates the solvents and hardens the plastic instantly. The paint doesn't just dry, it petrifies. As the canvas cools, the surface shrinks and snaps, creating thousands of tiny, perfect cracks across the image. He then rubs India ink into the fissures to simulate centuries of dust and grime, wipes it clean, and voila. A 300-year-old ghost is born in a 20th century kitchen. By 1936, the experiment is over. Han stands before a glowing canvas titled The Disciples at Emmaus. It is beautiful. It is haunting. And chemically, it is a lie that shouldn't exist. The trap is set. Now, he just needs a victim. Paris, 1937. A quiet art gallery becomes the stage for the most expensive bluff in history. Han van Meegeren doesn't walk into the gallery himself. He's too smart for that. He uses a front man, a shadowy lawyer with a story about a private Italian collection needing to be sold discreetly. The bait is in the water, and the shark that circles it is the biggest one in the ocean. Dr. Abraham Bredius. If the art world had a pope, it was Bredius. At 73 years old, he was the undisputed authority on Vermeer. His word was law. If Bredius said a painting was real, it became immortal. If he said it was fake, it was firewood. He was also the man who represented everything Han hated: the arrogance, the ivory tower. The gatekeeper who had once called Han unoriginal. Now, The gatekeeper is invited to a private viewing. The room is silent. Han is miles away, likely sweating through his suit, waiting for the news. Bredius approaches the canvas. He spends hours, not minutes, hours. He looks at the pigments. He stares into the eyes of the painted Christ. He scans the craquelure, those perfect plastic-hardened cracks Han spent years perfecting in his kitchen oven. Bredius is looking for a reason to say no, but he finds something else. He finds exactly what he wants to see. He had spent his whole life theorizing that Vermeer had a religious period. Han hadn't just painted a picture, he had painted Bredius's own ego. The old man finally speaks. His voice trembles. He doesn't just call it authentic. He goes to the press and publishes a review in the prestigious Burlington magazine. It begins with these words: "It is a wonderful moment in the life of a lover of art. What we have here is the masterpiece of Johannes Vermeer. The trap has snapped shut." Because Bredius staked his entire 50-year reputation on this one painting, no other critic dared to breathe a word of doubt. The establishment had fallen on its knees before a piece of plastic and 1930s pigments. The result? The Boijmans Museum in Rotterdam buys the painting for 520,000 guilders. In today's money, that is over $4.5 million. Han van Meegeren, the failed artist, is now one of the richest men in the Netherlands. But as the money floods his bank account, Han realizes something dangerous. The revenge was supposed to end here. He was supposed to reveal the truth and humiliate them. But the money is too good, and the world is begging for more. Han has just discovered that it's much easier to be a successful ghost than a struggling man. Han van Meegeren had a problem. He had set out to prove the world was blind, but now he was the one blinded by the sheer, overwhelming weight of his own success. The revenge was sweet, yes, but the money was intoxicating. Between 1937 and 1943, the impossible kept happening. Every year or so, like clockwork, another lost Vermeer would emerge from the shadows of history. Another biblical scene, another early career masterpiece. Behind the scenes, Han had turned his kitchen laboratory into a high-stakes factory. He was meticulous. He didn't just paint, he strategized. He adjusted each painting's style slightly to match what the experts expected from Vermeer's different periods. He was feeding them exactly what they were starving for. And not a single authority cried fake. The man once called unoriginal was now successfully puppeteering the entire European art establishment. By 1943, Han was living a life of obscene luxury. He bought a 12-bedroom mansion in the heart of Amsterdam. He filled it with sprawling gardens, a full staff of servants, and a fleet of fast cars. He hosted lavish parties for the elite, serving the finest champagne, while the rest of the city starved under Nazi occupation. But there was a bitter irony at the center of his mansion. The same critics who had destroyed his career now unknowingly worshipped every brushstroke he made, as long as the name Vermeer hung beneath the frame. Han was a god in a world he despised, but the stress of the double life was beginning to crack his mind. To keep the secret, to keep the lies flowing, Han turned to darker comforts. He developed a dangerous dependency on morphine and alcohol. He was a man living in a glass house, holding a sledgehammer. He was wealthy, powerful, and absolutely terrified. And then, World War II tore through the heart of Europe. As the Nazis began looting every museum and private collection they could find, Han saw a final golden opportunity. He didn't care about politics. He didn't care about morality. He only cared about the game. He was about to sell his most dangerous lie yet to a man who didn't take kindly to being cheated. Late 1943, Nazi-occupied Amsterdam is a city of whispers. But for Han van Meegeren, The whispers have turned into a roar of opportunity. He has just finished his latest Vermeer, Christ with the Woman Taken in Adultery. It is a masterpiece of deception, and it's about to land in the hands of the most dangerous art collector in history. Hermann Göring was obsessed. He didn't just want art, he wanted everything. He had spent the war looting Europe's finest museums and Jewish private collections, building a personal hoard that rivaled the Louvre. But there was one thing missing from his collection: a Vermeer. Han knew the stakes. Göring didn't debate authenticity with magnifying glasses in polite galleries. He settled disputes with firing squads. If the Reichsmarshal found out he was being cheated, Han wouldn't just lose his money, he would lose his head. The deal was brokered through shadowy middlemen. Göring didn't want to pay in cash. He proposed a trade. The offer was staggering. For this one newly discovered Vermeer, Göring would trade 137 genuine masterpieces from his personal collection. Works by Rubens, works by Cranach, real treasures stolen from across the continent. It was the most audacious art swap in human history. A forger was trading a freshly painted fraud for the birthright of European culture. The exchange happened in secret. Göring received his crown jewel and triumphantly hung it at his estate, Karenhall. He believed he had outsmarted the Dutch. In reality, Han van Meegeren had just liberated 137 real artworks from Nazi hands using nothing but pigment, plastic, and a mountain of lies. The con was perfect. The forger had swindled the devil himself and lived to celebrate it. But when the Reich falls and the dust of war clears, the Allies will find that Vermeer hanging in Göring's home, and they will trace it back to one man. Han van Meegeren is about to find out that being a genius is a very thin line from being a traitor. We're 1945. The Third Reich lies in ruins. Hitler is dead, and Allied forces are sweeping through Germany, recovering the mountains of stolen art Göring left behind. Among the thousands of looted treasures, they find it: the Vermeer, Christ with the Woman Taken in Adultery. The investigators trace the paperwork back through the shadows, and every lead points to one name: Han van Meegeren. To the Dutch people, Han wasn't just a criminal, he was a monster. He had sold a piece of their national soul to the enemy. Under wartime law, collaboration carried only one sentence: the firing squad. For weeks, Han sat in a freezing prison cell. The public screamed for his blood. Guards spat at him. The man who lived in a 12-bedroom mansion was now days away from a bullet to the chest. Han realized his perfect lie had become a noose. He had two choices: die as a wealthy traitor, or live as a humiliated fraud. He chose the fraud. On July 12, 1945, Han made the most desperate confession in legal history. He told the stunned investigators, "I did not sell a national treasure to the Nazis, because that painting isn't a Vermeer. I painted it myself." Nobody believed him. How could they? The greatest experts in the world had sworn these were 300-year-old masterpieces. The court thought he was just a dying man lying to save his neck. So Han gave them an ultimatum: give me a canvas, give me my paints, and I will prove it. I will paint a Vermeer right in front of you. For 6 weeks, under the watchful eyes of the police, the press, and the very experts he had humiliated, Han van Meegeren performed his final masterpiece. He recreated his secret process. He ground the pigments. He mixed the Bakelite resin. He baked the canvas. Slowly, an ancient image of Jesus among the doctors began to glow on the canvas. When the scientists ran the final chemical test on the courtroom painting, the result hit like a thunderclap. Bakelite detected. The proof was irrefutable. Han van Meegeren was a forger. But in that moment, he became something else. The man they wanted to execute was suddenly a folk hero. He hadn't betrayed Holland. He had performed the greatest patriotic scam in history. He had traded a worthless piece of plastic for 137 real masterpieces. He had outsmarted the Nazis at their own game. Han van Meegeren was no longer a traitor. He was the man who robbed the Reich with a paintbrush. The verdict was in. Han van Meegeren was found guilty, but not of treason, not of collaboration. He was convicted of falsifying signatures, the lightest charge possible. The man who once faced a firing squad was sentenced to just 1 year in prison. He had won. He had cleared his name, humiliated his enemies, and become the most famous man in the Netherlands. But Han would never serve his full sentence. The years of stress, the addiction to morphine, and the sheer intensity of the trial had broken his body. On December 30th, 1947, just weeks after his conviction, Han van Meegeren suffered a massive heart attack. He died at the age of 58, a hero to some, a criminal to others, and a ghost to the art world. But the story doesn't end with his death. Han left behind a question that still haunts every museum in the world today. Remember that critic from the 1920s? The one who called Han technically brilliant but creatively dead. For years, the greatest experts in the world stood before Han's paintings and wept. They called them divine. They called them masterpieces. They felt the soul of Vermeer in every brushstroke. But the moment they found out Han's name was on the back, the magic vanished. Suddenly, the paintings were ugly, clumsy, and worthless. This leads us to the ultimate truth of the art world. If a painting can move you to tears, if it can capture the beauty of the human soul, does it really matter who held the brush? Or are we just worshiping names and price tags? Han van Meegeren spent his life trying to prove that the experts were blind. In the end, he proved something much darker, that in the world of high art, the truth is often just a matter of who has the best story. Han died a forger, but he lived long enough to watch his lies become the truth. And perhaps in his final moments, he realized that he had finally achieved what he wanted all along. He was no longer unoriginal. He was unforgettable. If you think the art world is still being fooled today, let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this journey into the dark side of history, hit that subscribe button. We have many more masterpieces to uncover,